enjoy it. It's probably not unlike being an athlete from the perspective that you're probably got the jitters a little bit and you're nervous before you get there. But once you get there, usually those jitters go away and you kind of click into a mode because you're trained to do this type of work, or you're trained to go play soccer or hockey, whatever the case may be. So that perhaps the butterflies that you had walking down to the courtroom or walking into a rink, by the time you hit the ice or you hit in the courtroom, they've dissipated, and you might still be a little bit on edge, but for the most part, they've dissipated. And you're now in your kind of, in my case, courtroom mode, so you're there, and that's, there's a lot of preparation that goes into going to court. You know, when you go to court, there's usually lots of documents at play, and there's lots of legal written argument that's been produced in advance. And so basically, you've done a lot of your work before you get to court, and you've kind of had your roadmap or your script, so to speak. And so it's a matter of trying to be organized, trying to get your point across, and there's a certain level of performing as well, I suppose.
Have you ever had to deal with a client that was guilty or wrong?
Yes. As I said, I don't do much criminal, but I certainly have done criminal law over the years, and I still do some from time to time. And certainly, yes, I've had clients who were guilty, or were found to be guilty, and in some cases, people who've told you that they've committed the particular offense for which they're charged. You know, sometimes people are found guilty through a trial. More often than not, when they're guilty, they often plead guilty, and they avoid a trial. So yeah, I've definitely had that experience.
What's it like working with them?
I think it's okay. I mean, I think the way that that lawyers who do criminal law, and there's certainly lawyers who do more criminal law than I do now, I think basically what guides them and what kind of makes them feel comfortable with the whole thing is that they're performing a duty. From the perspective that we have a rule of law and there's a system in place, and part of that system is that everyone's presumed to be innocent and they have the opportunity to be fully defended. And so when a lawyer is representing a person, whether or not they've committed the offense or not committed the offense, as long as the lawyer acts appropriately and doesn't do anything that's unethical, then he or she's performing a service that that person's entitled to receive, and that if we didn't have that service, then our system of law wouldn't work the way we want it to work. Of course, it has to do with also, I suppose, as far as kind of difficulties that a person would have, but it has a lot to do as well as what people are charged with. If someone's, if I represent someone who's charged with impaired driving, well, that may have one type of emotion that goes with that. I haven't done a lot, but I've done some stuff with people who've been charged, for example, with sexual offenses, and so that might cause you a different feeling because you may be, for example, cross-examining a victim on the witness stand, so you have to kind of deal with different types of emotions because you have a duty to your client. At the same point in time, you have a duty to act appropriately and kind of perform your function for your client, but and do it in a way that's serves the interest of justice and kind of keeps the system going the way it should go.
That being said, what was the toughest moment of your career?
Toughest moment of my career? Probably two stand out for me, but a lot of times I think it's probably, if you ask a person that question, it might be, what's the most recent disappointment or the most recent hard thing that they can remember? Two things. One, I can remember, for example, having to cross-examine a witness or a victim with respect to an alleged sexual offense, and kind of conducting that cross-examination wasn't so bad from the perspective that you would plan ahead as to kind of how you're going to ask the questions and trying to be appropriate while you do it. But there's a certain level of anxiety that goes into leading into that, where you're trying to plan how you're going to do that, and also being cognizant of the fact that this person has gone through a poor experience, and you're appearing in court asking, in this case, a female, her questions, and representing someone who's alleged to have done something that wasn't obviously very nice to that person. So that there's a certain level of anxiety that goes with that. And then beyond that, a few years back, we had a trial that 35 days, and it was a lengthy trial, biggest case had ever been involved in, and the end result wasn't favorable to our client, and certainly at the time anyway, that was disappointing, not because the final decision was correct or incorrect, but more because, like anything else, if you invest years of work and time into something and it doesn't end the way you're hoping it to end, that's disappointing. Having said that, the best way to kind of deal with those issues is if you know that the work you've done in the past was the best you could do, then it makes it a little bit easier to accept the result.
On the other side of things, what was your favorite moment?
I can't think of a specific favorite moment, but I like practicing law. I enjoy my job. Everybody, no matter what your career is and your vocation is, sometimes you like your career more than others. But from a general perspective, I made the right choice for myself. I really enjoy practicing law, so on a day in, day out basis, I really generally like what I do. So there's that positive. And I think probably from maybe a more general perspective, what I like is that, and this is probably more when you're dealing with individuals. A lot of the stuff I do now is for companies. And so you probably don't get quite as much of this now, but people will come, in my experience, to see a lawyer with something that bothers them. It could be anything. It could be the fact that they've been in a motor vehicle accident and they've been injured. They've got these injuries, can't work. They want to receive a fair and appropriate settlement to deal with that. It may be that they found out that they're terminally ill and they don't, perhaps what they thought their life expectancy was going to be isn't what it's actually going to be. So as a result, perhaps they never had gotten themselves a will. So they're coming to see you in not great circumstances because people know at the time why they're in there that particular day. Or there could be someone who's being sued for maybe they can't pay a debt or whatever the case would be. But the reality is that generally speaking, when people, in my experience, when they come to see you and you sit down with them and you go through it, regardless of whether or not you can give them a good news story completely, they typically are relieved when they leave. And it's not because it's me, it's just because they've got something that's bothering them or something that's important to them, and they go to see someone who's trained to assist them, and they present their problem or they present their issue, and this person says, well, this is how we're going to try and to address this. And again, sometimes the news they get back isn't always what they want to hear, but at least they've been told, here's how we are going to try and address this, and I'm going to assist you to do it. And people, you can see people just from a physical perspective just become relieved by the fact that now they've got someone to assist them, someone who's trained in an area they don't understand. And so you kind of get a good feeling knowing that you've taken some type of weight off someone's shoulders. Maybe it's not a permanent removal of that weight from their shoulders, but at least at the time you can see that they're a lot happier perhaps than when they came in the front door, and that's a good feeling.
Are you at all interested in becoming a judge later on?
I don't think that there'd be too many people who practice litigation who've never thought about being a judge. So I guess I'd fall into that group of people. It's certainly something that when you practice litigation is always in the back of your mind, and perhaps the same question that you ask yourself, would I ever want to be a judge? I think that being a judge would have a lot of good points to it. It would be interesting. Particularly if you practice for a while, then it was an opportunity to do something different, like by being a judge. So it's something that I would always be willing to think about. Having said that, I really enjoy practicing law. I like the fact that, to a certain extent, my day is my own. I have things I need to do for clients, but it's up to me to decide how I'm going to get those things done in the next few months or years, whatever the case may be. So I have a lot of flexibility like that, and I get to meet lots of different types of people and different types of clients and different types of law, and so I like that type of change. So right now I'm quite happy with what I'm doing, but I'd never ruled out the possibility.
Is a big part of being a lawyer your reputation?
I think that probably is certainly a factor. Particularly the longer you've been practicing. I think that for the most part, if a young couple decided tomorrow that they were buying a house and they needed a lawyer to do that, is someone's sparkling reputation versus someone's pretty good reputation going to make the difference? Probably not. They probably make the call because they know they have a family member who has a lawyer who did their house transaction for them, or a friend, or whatever the case may be. But as you start to practice over the years, and perhaps things become a little bit more complex, a lot of times, say it's a business type matter, a company might come and say, listen, we want to retain you to do this particular thing. And it's because either they've heard about you and know that you do this type of stuff, and if they've come to see you, they must have heard that you do it not too badly. Or it's because they've heard, other companies that they've talked to and say, listen, here's someone who can do this type of work. He or she's pretty good at it. So from that perspective, word of mouth and reputation can be important. And it also can be important, in many ways, your reputation is almost as, perhaps even more important in relation to the clients that you have. Even more so than the clients that you don't have yet. Because, particularly if you do work for companies and whatnot, a lot of your work is repeat work. So if you do a piece of business for a small business or a large company or whatever the case may be, and they like what you did, and the next time they have a legal issue, they'll come back to you. So sometimes just your reputation with the clients that you have can generate even more work than from prospective clients.
Is there anything else that people may not know or stereotype about lawyers?
I think that probably a lot of people are like I was growing up, and that is they assume that all lawyers go to court. So when I say, I'm a litigator, it's because I do court-related work. They assume that all lawyers do that, and then that's not. The reality is that's not the case. I'd say at least 50% of lawyers don't do court-related work, but they're the ones who are creating the contracts or drafting the contracts in order for transactions to take place, or they're the ones who are, as I said, taking instructions so you can do a will, or maybe looking after your house sale, or the sale of your business, or the purchase of another business. So I think that's probably one thing. I think a lot of people assume that everyone goes to court. That's not the case. And I think probably, people might be surprised perhaps on two things. I think most people think that lawyers are pretty busy. I think when you practice law, you realize that perhaps the practice of law is even busier than you might have thought, as far as kind of work pressures from the perspective of lots of client demands and things that need to get done. That may surprise people. On the other hand, notwithstanding the fact that there are a lot of those work-type pressures based on client work, people might be surprised at how much flexibility lawyers have from the perspective that, particularly as you get more senior, you have a number of things that you need to get done, as I indicated before, but you have a lot of flexibility kind of in your day as to how you get that done. And so you can kind of prioritize it, and if it happens between the hours of 9 and 5, great. But if it happens between the hours of 7 and 10 that night, that's fine too. Not that one wants to put off everything to an evening, but it does give you a little bit more flexibility as far as your rest of your life, so that if you need to kind of manage other things you need to do, it's nice to have that work flexibility that you can kind of get things done when you need to get them done.
So do you find yourself working late often?
I don't work late as much as I used to. Up until a number of years ago, I think I worked late quite a bit. I don't do it as much. Perhaps I've become a little bit more efficient and find ways to get things done. Having said that, I always, and this I guess kind of goes to the perhaps flexibility, I always found the practice of law, even if I worked late, again, I can pick when I would want to work late. So for example, working late for me never usually meant not going home for supper, for example. What it meant is going home for supper and having supper and doing things with your family, and then putting kids to bed, whatever the case may be, and then perhaps working a few hours later on that evening. And so I had the flexibilities, whereas someone else might have decided they want to stay at the office and work through their supper. And if that's the case, that's their choice. But so work a lot of hours, but yet have the flexibility to pick when those hours work for you best.
Thank you for taking your time out of your day to do